I want to start with a warning, and I want to be honest with you about why. Almost everything you are being told about gold right now is being measured with the wrong ruler. The financial channels talk about a good week, a strong month, a nice run. They frame this metal in weeks. And that framing, whether they mean it to or not, is the single most effective way to make you miss what is actually happening. Because a real move in gold has never been a story about a week. It has been a story about a decade. If you are holding gold right now or thinking about it, this matters directly to you and to your retirement. Not because I am about to promise you a price, because I am not, and anyone who does is lying to you. It matters because the way you measure a thing determines whether you have the patience to hold it. So here is what I want to do. By the end of this, you are going to understand what a real gold leg actually looks like in scale, not the surface headline noise, but the full shape of it, and why the people who profit from your fear would very much prefer you never see the whole picture. Let me give you the first piece right now, because I do not believe in making you wait through a full minute of teasing. Here is a fact most people have simply never sat with. There was a time, within living memory, when the price of gold was fixed by law. The government set it, held it there by decree, and told the world that was that. And when that arrangement finally broke, gold did not rise by some tidy percentage. Over the years that followed, it multiplied many times over, not doubled, multiplied again and again across a decade. That is the scale I am talking about. That is what a real leg can reach when the thing holding the price down finally lets go. I want to walk you through that story properly, because it is the spine of everything I am going to tell you. And it is true. Go back to the early 1970s. For a generation, the world ran on a system where the dollar was tied to gold, and other currencies were tied to the dollar. It was orderly. It was official. And underneath it, the price of gold was pinned at about $35 an ounce. That was not a market price. That was a policy. It was a wall the most powerful nations on earth had agreed to defend. Then, in 1971, the wall came down. The president closed what they called the gold window, and he called it temporary. It was never temporary. It was never reversed. And here is the part I need you to feel, because it is the whole point of this video. From that moment, from around $35, gold did not just tick higher. Over the rest of that decade, it climbed and climbed until, by the start of 1980, it had reached over $800 an ounce. From 35 to over 800. Sit with that. That is more than 20 times over, across a single decade. Now here is what the weekly framing will never tell you, and this is where the trading desks and the financial media go very quiet. That decade-long run was not a smooth escalator. It did not go up in a straight, comfortable line that let everyone relax and hold. In the middle of that very run, gold fell hard. From a peak in late 1974 near $200, it slid back toward 100 by 1976. It nearly cut in half. In the middle of the greatest gold decade of the modern era, the metal lost close to half its value, and I promise you at that moment, the headlines declared it over. The experts said the gold story was finished. The people who had bought near the top felt like fools. And then, from that low, gold multiplied roughly 8 times into the 1980 peak. 8 times, after the halving. Think about who survived that and who did not. The person who measured gold in weeks, who watched it cut in half and believed the financial press, sold near the bottom of that mid-decade collapse and never came back. The person who understood the scale of what was unfolding, who could see it was a decade-long repricing and not a weekly trade, held through the pain and was there for the eightfold move that followed. Same metal, same decade. 2 completely different outcomes decided entirely by which ruler they used. That is the enemy in this story, and I want to name it plainly. It is not one villain in a room. It is a whole machinery, the big banks, the trading desks, the financial media that makes its money on your churn. A frightened holder who dumps his metal into a dip is their paying customer. Every time they frame gold as a weekly trade, every time they run the segment about a bad month, they are training you to measure the one asset in your life that only rewards the long ruler with the shortest ruler they can hand you. They do not want you to understand this because a retiree who understands scale is a retiree who does not panic sell, and a retiree who does not panic sell is no use to them at all. Now let me stop and speak to you directly, because this is exactly the point where it stops being history and starts being about your money. If what I am describing has even a chance of rhyming with the present, then the real question is not whether gold has had a good week. The real question is whether you own any of the metal at all, and whether you own it in a form nobody can take from you. And here is something you may not know, something the people who accumulate quietly, would rather not become common knowledge. The largest, most sophisticated buyers on Earth are not the retail investors chasing headlines. They are the central banks. For 3 straight years, the world's central banks have bought gold at a pace we have not seen in generations, well over 1,000 tons a year, roughly double what they were buying the decade before. Gold recently overtook the euro to become the second largest reserve asset held by central banks on Earth, behind only the dollar. These are the most informed money managers in the world, and they are voting with real reserves, not with a hot take on a Friday. So here is what I want you to know, and I am going to keep it short and then get right back to the story. There is a perfectly legal, perfectly ordinary way for you to do what those central banks are doing. Most retirees have no idea it exists. You can move a portion of the retirement savings you already have, your 401k, your IRA, into physical gold and silver, real metal, held for you, without triggering taxes and without triggering penalties by using what is called a self-directed precious metals, IRA. It is the same account you already have, just holding something that cannot be printed. I put together a free guide that walks through exactly how it works. In plain English, if you are watching this on your television, just scan the QR code on your screen. If you are on your phone or your computer, go to jeffreedguide.com. And let me be clear about who this is for, because there is a myth that this is only for insiders. It is not. If you have $100,000 or more in any retirement account, this is squarely for you. Now back to the story, because it gets more important from here. Here is the part that actually changes things, and almost nobody connects it. Why did that $35 wall hold for so long, and why did it finally break? It held because the most powerful nations agreed to defend it. In the late 1960s, a group of nations literally pooled their reserves and spent them defending that fixed gold price, and for a while it worked. And then one day they simply stopped. They abandoned the defense overnight. The wall did not crumble slowly for the public to see. It was held and held and held, and then it was gone. And on the other side of that abandoned wall was the 20-fold decade. I am telling you this because the shape matters. A real gold leg does not announce itself. It does not begin with a friendly headline telling you to get positioned. It begins with a suppression that finally exhausts itself, and it delivers most of its return over years, not weeks, punctuated by violent drops that shake out everyone who measured it wrong. If you only ever remember one thing from me, remember that the scale is measured in decades and the pain is delivered in weeks, and the machinery that profits from you will only ever show you the weeks. And this pattern of decree over market is not some ancient curiosity. Go back a little further, to the 1930s. In that era, the government simply revalued the dollar price of gold overnight, from just under $21 to $35 by pure decree in a single stroke. Overnight. No market, no negotiation, just a stroke of a pen that changed what the metal was worth by roughly 2/3. I bring this up because it tells you the truth about the rules under your savings. They are policy, not physics. The wall can be built by decree, held by decree, and torn down by decree, and in every single case, the people watching the weekly price had no idea the ground under them had shifted until it already had. Now, is the present anything like that setup? I cannot promise you it is, and I will not. But look at what is structurally true right now, and judge for yourself. For decades, there was a reliable rule in markets that when real interest rates went up, gold went down. That relationship was iron, and in recent years it simply broke. Gold has climbed even as real yields stayed high, and the people who watch this for a living are nearly unanimous on why. The old price setter, the paper traders reacting to rates, got replaced at the margin by a new price setter, the central banks buying physical metal for reasons that have nothing to do with this month's rate decision. When the marginal buyer changes, the old rules stop working. That is not noise. That is a regime change, the kind that historically precedes the long legs, not the short ones. And there is a reason those central banks turned into relentless buyers, and I will state it carefully because it is not about politics. It is about mechanics. A few years ago, the world watched one major nation's foreign currency reserves get frozen by other countries in a matter of days. Every central bank on earth took the same lesson from that. Reserves held in someone else's currency and someone else's system can be switched off. Gold sitting in your own vault cannot be frozen by another country. It has no counterparty. It is nobody else's promise. That single realization is a large part of why the official buying accelerated, and it is not the kind of thing that reverses in a quarter. It is a generational rethink of what safety even means. Now let me give you the honest, uncomfortable middle of this, because I respect you too much to sell you a fantasy. Even inside a genuine multi-year leg, the drops are brutal, and they are engineered to make you quit. Remember, in the middle of the greatest gold decade in modern history, the metal nearly halved, and we have seen echoes of that violence more recently. There was a year where a mere hint from the central bank that it might slow down its bond buying, just a hint, sent gold down close to 30% in a matter of months, though nothing fundamental about gold had changed. And go back to that great 70s run itself. The drops inside it were savage every single time, arriving precisely when the crowd was most certain the whole thing was finished, and every one of them was followed by a leg that made the fall look small. The lesson is always the same. The shakeout is not the end of the story. The shakeout is how the story separates the people who understand scale from the people who do not. This is where I want to say something practical about your own position, and then I will bring it home. If you decide gold belongs in your retirement, own the metal, not a paper promise that behaves fine right up until the moment you actually need it. Size it so that a drop of 20 or 30%, which will happen, cannot force you to sell. That is the entire game. The people who get destroyed in these moves are not the ones who are wrong about the direction. They are the ones who owned it in a form they had to sell at the worst possible time, or who bought so much that a normal shakeout put them in a position where they had to raise cash. Own it in a form nobody can freeze, size it so no drop can force your hand, and do not sell into the shakeout. That is not a prediction. That is just how you survive long enough to be right. Think back to that mid-decade halving in the 1970s. Everything about the fundamental case was still intact, still building toward the eightfold move that came next. And yet the price cut in half and the headlines called it dead. The only people that dropped destroyed were the ones who had put themselves in a position where they could not afford to be patient. Do not be that person. Patience is not a personality trait here. It is a structural decision you make in advance, when you choose how you own it and how much. And now I want to give you the beat that I think matters most, the one the financial channels will never hand you, because it is the part that is actually happening right now. You are early. I do not mean that as flattery. I mean it structurally. The smart money already sees this. The central banks are already positioned, buying more gold in a year than they bought in most of the last decade. But the mainstream, the pension funds, the financial advisors who put everyone in the same four funds, the neighbors at the dinner table, they have not caught on. Gold is not the thing everyone at the party is bragging about. There is no line around the block. There is no mania. And that absence is the tell. Because here is how it always ends. By the time it becomes obvious, by the time gold leads every news segment and every advisor recommends it, and your brother-in-law is suddenly an expert, the easy part of the move will already be behind us. That is what the 1970s decade teaches. The people who did well did not get an invitation. Nobody called them and told them the wall was about to come down. Nobody sends you that letter. The whole point, the entire advantage, is to understand the scale before the crowd arrives. Because once the crowd arrives, the crowd is the price. We are not in that moment yet. And that, precisely, is why this matters now and not later. So let me answer the question in the title directly, the way I promised I would. Could gold's next leg shock everyone? Here is my honest answer. If this is a real leg, in the historical sense, then yes, and the shock will not come from a single dramatic week. The shock will come from the scale, revealed slowly, over years, to people who were trained to look at it 1 week at a time. The person measuring in weeks will be shocked because the total move will dwarf anything they thought possible. The person who understood the shape all along will not be shocked at all. They will just be holding. This is a case, not a guarantee, and it is not personal financial advice. Volatility is real. The drops will be sharp, and I have no price and no date for you, because nobody honest does. But if you have watched this all the way to the end, you have already done the hard part, which is caring enough to understand instead of react. So here is what I would do next. I hold a free one-on-one educational web conference for people who are serious about this, and it is specifically for viewers with $100,000 or more in their retirement savings who watch to the end. If that is you, mention that you watched the full video. And here is the honest reason to do it now rather than someday. The window where a decision like this is calm, unhurried, and completely reversible is exactly the window where nothing feels urgent, which is right now, while the crowd is still looking away. Once it is obvious, it is crowded, and crowded is expensive. To take that next step, if you are watching on your television, scan the QR code on your screen. If you are on your phone or your computer, go to jeffreedguide.com. Bring your questions. There is no obligation and no pressure. I started by telling you that almost everyone is measuring gold with the wrong ruler, in weeks instead of decades. That fixed wall at $35 did not fall gently, and what came after it was not a good week. It was a 20-fold decade that punished everyone who blinked in the middle and rewarded everyone who understood the scale. I cannot tell you the present will rhyme with that past. But I can tell you that if it does, the people who see it early, who own real metal, who size it so no drop can force their hand, and who refuse to be shaken out, will not be the ones who are shocked. They will be the ones who were paying attention while everyone else watched the weak. Use the longer ruler. That is the whole thing.